Brr. I don't know about you guys, but the older I get, the less I enjoy hiking and backpacking during the cold winter months here in Ohio. So 2 years ago, I started an annual tradition of going backpacking in the South during February to avoid the most brutal part of the winters here in Ohio. In today's video, I will be showcasing some of the highlights and pros and cons of a 100-mile section on the Florida Trail that I did in 2021, as well as a 100-mile section in the low country of South Carolina on the Palmetto Trail from last year. So, if you are ready to escape backpacking in the cold up north and ready to trade in those snowshoes, skis, and microspikes for sunshine, warmth, and palm trees, then stay tuned. These might be just the places you were looking for. So the Florida Trail has gained a lot of popularity with thru-hikers over the past few years, especially those wanting to be out on trail, getting their trail legs during January and February before beginning their Appalachian Trail thru hikes in March and April. I even ran into several thru-hikers myself when I was on the Florida Trail in 2021. It was when I was on the Ocala National Forest section. I ran into a fella named Walmart, and he was just out thru-hiking the Florida Trail, and I met him at the 88 store, which is a really cool place to hang out while you're on the Florida Trail. And I also ran into a fella named Roswell. Now Roswell has done some pretty incredible things. He was actually in the middle of his ECT, the Eastern Continental Trail. He began his hike in Key West and was traveling all the way north, like 4,000 some miles into Canada. He biked across America and has hiked all kinds of long trails. So it was pretty cool running into Roswell on the Florida Trail. All right, now let's talk about some of the pros and cons, or some of the things I liked and disliked about the Florida Trail. Being from Ohio, I was not going to drive over 1,000 miles plus just to backpack for a week in Florida, so I caught a flight from Columbus to Jacksonville, Florida, where I proceeded to rent a car and made the 1-hour drive to American Canoe Adventures in White Springs, which was near the beginning of the Suwannee River section. They allowed me to leave my car at their property, which was awesome, and shuttled me to the beginning of the Suwannee River section at the Bell Springs Trailhead, and would pick me up 3 days later near the end of the Suwannee River section at Gibson County Park, approximately 45 trail miles later. First of all, and most importantly, along the Suwannee River section, I always had water. That's not always the case on the Florida Trail. There are definitely some dry sections, and you often have to rely on trail angels, leaving water caches along certain sections of the trail. When I was on the Florida Trail, I used an app called Far Out. It was actually called Gut Hook at the time. I used that for navigating and helping me find all my water sources and campsites. But I always had water, so that was never an issue. You're always walking almost right beside the beautiful Suwannee River the entire time. Lots of different vegetation that you don't see in the northern states, like saw palmettos and palm trees, and beautiful oak hammocks. I saw lots of really nice campsites along the way, so finding a great place to camp each night was never a problem. And of course the Holton Creek River campsites, which are an awesome place to stop and camp for the night when on the Suwannee River section. And of course I gotta mention the infamous abandoned Suwannee Springs Graffiti Bridge, also known as the Hillman Bridge or the Bridge to Nowhere. This bridge was really cool. It was covered from top to bottom, side to side, end to end in graffiti. So that was a really cool thing to see on the Suwannee River section. All right, now let's talk about a few of the things that I disliked about the Suwannee River section. First and foremost is probably the sand. If you've ever hiked or backpacked in the sand, you know what I'm talking about. It just makes moving through the trail a little more difficult and definitely takes a lot more of your energy to backpack in sand. Now the second con that I'm going to mention about the Suwannee River section did not affect me because it was very dry when I was there and there was no sections of the trail that were impassable for me. However, after heavy rains, there are sections along the Suwannee River that are nearly impassable and would often have to be rerouted around. So it's probably best to check with somebody in the Suwannee River section like American Canoe Adventures to find out if the trail is passable after heavy rains. And if that's the case, it might be better to choose a section in the Ocala National Forest where no matter how much it rains, you're probably not going to have too much trouble getting through that section. There are some great Florida Trail Facebook groups out there that you can join that have a wealth of information and knowledge when helping you plan your trip, helping you line up shuttles, and just being able to answer any questions you may have about the Florida Trail. There's not a whole lot to dislike about the Suwannee River section, and it is rated as one of the top sections of the Florida Trail for backpacking. So after completing the Suwannee River section, I was picked up by American Canoe Adventures at Gibson City Park and taken back to my rental car at their property, where I made the hour-and-a-half drive to Jupiter Springs, Florida to begin my Ocala National Forest hike. I had made prior arrangements with a Facebook friend that lived and worked in Jupiter Springs campground, so I was able to leave my rental car at the campground, and he gave me a shuttle to the northern section of the Ocala National Forest to Rodman Dam to begin my 55-mile through hike of a majority of the Ocala National Forest. Okay, now let's talk about some of the things I really liked about the Ocala National Forest. This section is consistently rated as one of the better sections to hike along the Florida Trail, so that's why I did not want to skip this section when I was down there. This section was absolutely gorgeous. The scenery was stunning. I really enjoyed the beautiful pine forest. It was easy walking, very flat, camping options galore. It was just such a very unique backpacking experience compared to backpacking in the north, with the beautiful oak hammocks, the Spanish moss, the world's largest sand pine scrub forest, several natural springs, wet prairies, and stands of longleaf pines just made this a truly magical place during the winter for a northerner. I could go on and on about how awesome the Ocala National Forest section was, but now let's talk about some of the things that I disliked about it. It happened to be a very dry February when I was there, so I did struggle at times to find water. Fortunately, I had a rainstorm come through on my first night and I was able to get water when I had completely ran out. But normally when they have regular rains, you shouldn't have that many issues finding water. There's a couple prairies that have wet spots that never dry up. There's a couple lakes and some sinkholes along the way. And if you use the Far Out app, you should be able to see where those water sources are. Now there's one more thing about the Ocala section that was a little bit difficult for me. It's not really a con, but it's something to take into consideration. For most people, it's probably a pro, but it did get a little warm for me. Coming from Ohio, being acclimated to single digits or even below zero temperatures, to directly hiking in 75 degrees, that was a little hot. Now, I know typical Florida temperatures are probably in the 80s and 90s and even close to 100, but when I was there, 70 to 75 felt very warm to me. So keep that in mind when hiking out in the open prairies and having that full sun exposure. It might be best to have a hat or an umbrella with you. All right, moving right along, let's talk about the Palmetto Trail. I was there just last year during February. What an awesome trail, and I can't wait to get back on it. I'm actually going to be hiking another 100 to 150 mile section with Leonidas on the Palmetto Trail in mid-February. Once again, I decided to fly for this backpacking trip. I caught a flight from Columbus to Charleston, and I had lined up a shuttle by Marie Butler. She is the coastal trail coordinator for the passages that I hiked. Passages are also just another name for sections. So her name and number is listed on the Trail Association website, and they are happy to arrange shuttles for you for a small donation to the Trail Association. The Palmetto Trail is made up of 31 sections, also known as passages, and it begins in the low country near the Intercoastal Waterway on the East Coast and travels nearly 500 miles all the way to the Blue Ridge Mountains in the western side of the state, very close to the Foothills Trail. And on my trip in 2022, I completed the first 5 passages beginning near the East Coast, totaling approximately 120 miles. The Palmetto Trail website offers free maps through Avenza, so if you download the Avenza app, you can have maps on your phone offline showing you all the water sources and campsites and helping you navigate through the trail. Now let's talk about some of my favorite things about the Palmetto Trail. It is also a very flat and easy to hike trail, very similar to the Ocala National Forest. And you see things like saw palmettos and palm trees and Spanish moss and groves of longleaf pines. Now obviously this is going to change as you travel further west away from the low country. The landscape's going to start resembling more of like the Appalachian Trail sections or maybe even sections of the Foothills Trail. I also really enjoyed having some restaurants along the way. Now, because I knew of 2 specific places that were going to have food when I was on the Palmetto Trail, I purposely packed less food knowing I was going to stop and eat there. So that was one thing I really enjoyed. Another great thing about the Palmetto Trail is it's a great option for thru hikers looking for a shorter trail. If they don't have months and months to do the Appalachian Trail or even the Florida Trail, The Palmetto Trail is just that right distance that you could go out there and probably complete it in a month, give or take. Another thing I thought was pretty cool about the Palmetto Trail are the amount of trailhead parking areas. So it's very easy to make this a day hike or a section hike or an entire through hike with all the parking areas along the trail. Now for some of the things that I disliked about the Palmetto Trail. You can expect some long road walks. Now often those road walks are on sand or gravel roads, so it's not all asphalt, but there are sections on some of the passages that are not fully connected, and you're going to have to expect some road walking to get to the next passage. Water can also be difficult at times to find along the Palmetto Trail. The trail coordinators will often leave water caches for through hikers and section hikers, but when I was there, I really didn't have too much trouble finding creeks and streams and ponds to filter water from. But keep that in mind, there are some stretches similar to Ocala National Forest where it can be a little bit on the dry side. All right, some final thoughts about hiking in the South. I feel that February is a great time to hike either on the Florida Trail or the Palmetto Trail. You have pretty moderate temperatures. Lows are going to be in the 40s and 50s, maybe some 30s on the Palmetto Trail since it is a little further north, and highs ranging from 50s, 60s, and even 70s. And a lot of times on the Palmetto Trail, February is when things start to come to life, almost like April in Ohio. I remember seeing trees budding and flowers coming up and hearing the peeper frogs even during the middle of February. Also, no bug issues whatsoever on the Palmetto Trail, so I think February is a great time of the year to avoid bugs there. I do remember one day on when it was sunny out that I did have like those face gnats that I was constantly swatting away when I was on the Florida Trail. But for the most part, I think February is a great time to avoid bugs in the South. You can also expect low humidity, lots of warmth and sunshine, and for the most part, dry trails. Now there are a few things that could be prohibitive to traveling to the South to backpack during the winter. Obviously, airfare can be very expensive. There can be delays, there can be cancellations. And if you're driving, travel time can be long and costly. So those are definitely some issues you need to weigh ahead of time. Shuttles can be expensive to line up and difficult to line up as well. So definitely a few things to consider there before planning a backpacking trip in the South. Alrighty, there you have it, folks. My 2 cents on where you can go backpacking in the South to avoid the cold, wintry months in the North. And like I said, I loved it so much. I'll be back on the Palmetto Trail in mid-February with Leonidas. Really looking forward to that. And I hope to eventually get back down to the Florida Trail and knock out the entirety of the Florida Trail in the future. So which of these 2 trails that I've discussed here today looks best to you for a winter backpacking trip in the South? Let me know down in the comments below which one you would choose. Also, I'm always looking for new destinations to go backpacking in the South during the winter. If you have any suggestions, let me know in the comments and I will definitely check those out. As always, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and we'll see you all again real soon in the next adventure.